Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Retro Pop Planet and welcome to West 72nd Street. We are across the street from the Dakota and this is where John Lennon was shot and killed by an obsessed fan on December 8th, 1980. John is arguably one of the most complicated of the Beatles. He's also the one that the fans spent the least amount of time with. He would be 83 years old this year. So in today's video, we are going to track some of the final stops, the final places that John visited in that fateful day. I'm a massive Beatles fan, and for all the years that I've been coming to New York City, I've never paid my respects here, never visited Strawberry Fields, which is just across the street in Central Park. So I thought I would bring you along with me here today. So let's go. Now for a bit of background. John and Yoko married in Gibraltar in 1969. The Beatles announced their split the following year to the consternation of the fans. In 1971, after months of living at the St. Regis Hotel on the East Side, the pair began renting a studio apartment in New York's West Village. In 1972, after an extensive immigration battle with the Nixon administration over their anti-war beliefs, they released the album Sometime in New York City. The couple moved into the Dakota in 1973. The 65-unit building was notoriously strict about its residents. Built in 1884, the building house counted a number of famous celebrities as residents, such as Lauren Bacall and Judy Garland. And for a time, Roberta Flack owned the unit next door to John and Yoko. To the distaste of some other residents, the couple at one point owned 5 units, which, in addition to being their primary residence, they used as a guest home, a storage space, and a studio for Miss Ono. The living space and studio alone had a combined square footage of nearly 6,000 square feet. Their son Sean was born in 1975. Having already stepped away from music for an extended period in the 1970s, John was famous for taking long strolls with Sean and Yoko through Central Park. It is said that he enjoyed the anonymity of New York City over the constant interruption by fans in London. Numerous photos exist of the family walking through the park, and the video for Mind Games was filmed there in November of 1974. On December 8th, 1980, John interacted with his killer not once, but twice on the sidewalk outside of the Dakota. John and Yoko had spent most of the day in their apartment doing various things to promote their newly released album, Double Fantasy. This album was receiving much better reviews than their previous compilations. We know he sat down for a radio interview with Lori Kay, the first extensive interview he'd given in several years. I also read a report that John and Yoko did a small photo shoot that day, but can't find much information to confirm this claim. Around 5 p.m., they both left for the studio to work on a track for another new album. Opting for a cab, they first encountered John's killer as he was seeking an autograph on the street. An area photographer just happened to catch that moment. This is where the retelling gets a bit murky. One account places them at the Record Plant recording studio. Behind me there at 321 West 44th Street, where that gray slate structure is now, was the original location for the Record Plant, which was a veritable who's who recording studio. Now, that is one of the locations that John Lennon supposedly was recording before he went back to the Dakota. Now, there's some very famous artists that have played here over the years, and it's absolutely amazing that we're standing right outside. Studio A. Here's a very short list. The Velvet Underground, Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa, the Rolling Stones, and Cyndi Lauper's debut album, She's So Unusual, was recorded here. Studio A was the Quadraphonic Sound Studio, and John Lennon was reportedly working on Walking on Thin Ice here the day that he died. If indeed John and Yoko traveled here on the 8th, their cab would have rolled up to the sidewalk in front of the building. Presumably there would have been a doorman, as there is now. The studio was purchased by George Martin in 1987 and relocated to Los Angeles. So it's really cool. It's actually still called the plant. However, I'm not sure exactly what it's used for now, because this location was closed, I believe, in the 1980s. There are also 2 very famous rooftop publicity photos for John Lennon. I'm not sure exactly which part of the roof he was on. But we're gonna go around the block so we can get a better view. But you can see this building here. So we obviously can't get on the rooftop, but in those photos behind John, you can actually see this building. And some of these buildings still exist, however, there has been a lot of new construction. And there's another photo of him, and you see this over his shoulder. The other location he was reportedly spotted at was the Hit Factory. Now, the other location that some people say he was recording at was behind me, 353 West 48th Street. This was the Hit Factory, and oh my God, it is amazing that it does not even look like a recording studio, and I believe it's long gone now, but the amazing songs that were funneled out of this building. Notable albums from this studio include Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Keys of Life, Meatloaf's Bat Outta Hell, The Talking Heads, Rolling Stones, Peter Frampton, and John and Yoko's Double Fantasy. The studio is still in the city, but in a different location. It's actually conceivable that they hit up both locations since they're only 4 blocks apart. It's amazing that in the space before social media, there's so much mystery surrounding their whereabouts. In today's timeline, they would have been tagged by the studio in an Instagram post. But you know that John would have hated that. John and Yoko returned home by car around 10:30 p.m. They had planned to go to a restaurant after the recording session, but John wanted to say goodnight to 5-year-old Sean. They opted to exit the vehicle at the sidewalk instead of the covered archway, John carrying cassettes from the day's recording. The killer was there holding a copy of J.D. Salinger's novel, Catcher in the Rye, and the LP that he had signed for him earlier in the evening. As John walked past him, the killer pulled out a handgun and fired several times into his back and shoulder. John was transported to Roosevelt Hospital, now Sinai West, but by all accounts died at the scene. The senselessness of the act shocked the world. After John's passing, Yoko and Sean continued to reside at the Dakota. And I recently read that she just moved out this past summer. Now, she is 90 years old and she moved upstate to a farmland. She no longer gives interviews, and the residents were actually mourning the loss of Yoko in this building because she had been such an institution for the arts community up in this side of Central Park for a long time. Fans from around the world flocked to Central Park, a stone's throw from the building, and set up makeshift memorials honoring John. A more permanent area was developed and unveiled in 1985, which would have been John's 45th year. Strawberry Field is of course named after the Beatles song that Lennon wrote, and the children's home which was near his childhood home in Liverpool. So now we are across the street and entering Central Park West. And Strawberry Fields is supposedly over here. "43 years later, and it's amazing how many people still flock to this area. This is Strawberry Fields, a dedicated city space, a dedicated quiet zone. It's really nice out here, and supposedly Yoko spread John's ashes around here. I do not know where, probably just throughout this entire area.
Oh, here's a bit of a deep cut. Well, I guess no such thing as deep cuts with Beatle tunes, but it's a George Harrison song.
needed someone. Had it been some other day, it might not have been like this, but you see now.
It's a really amazing place to come. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next episode.
With